Hi.
Elle says hi. You want to say hi to everyone?
Hello.
Everyone, gute Nacht. All right. So, thank you for everyone that joined so far. And Hadassah is new. Hello, Hadassah, from everyone. So, Hadassah, it's your obligation to question anything you don't understand. If you don't, you're messing up, okay? You can write it in the chat. You can chat it to me privately, or you could just start talking. But that is your obligation, and then you can learn. If you can't question, you can't learn. All right. So we are holding in chapter 22 of Tanya. So let's remind ourselves a little bit about what's going on, and then we will continue. What we start, I'll go back a little bit more backwards just to give a big overview here. Tanya starts off by saying the goal of the author of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, Admor Zaken. The goal is to enable every single one of us to live a verse. The verse that is the foundation of Tanya are the words, and the thing is very near to you in your mouth and in your heart to do it. And that verse created 53 chapters of Tanya. Why did that verse create 53 chapters? Because we say, really? It's so near, it's so easy, it's so accessible for me to serve God so well in my mouth, in my heart, in my mind, in my actions, in my speech. It doesn't seem too easy at all. Actually, it seems almost impossible. It seems very, very difficult to be such a God-fearing person who's giving God every thought and every speech and every action. So what in the world is this verse talking about? So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya says, no, that's not true. It's actually very, very, very doable. It's very accessible to serve God perfectly. Based on one premise. Your mind can create your emotions. When you're in an emotional space, this will lead to your actions. So if you use your mind to create a love and fear of God, that love and fear will be the catalyst to serve God perfectly. The more you love God and the more you fear God, the more you must have this relationship to Him. And my relationship to God is contingent on my service. Judaism doesn't believe in any like cardiac jewelry. Jewish in my heart. But we believe in the heart, because the more I have a passion for God in my heart, the more I love God and therefore want to give to Him. I love God and therefore want to be with Him. I serve. That's the only way to give to Him. That's the only way to be with Him. And the more I have this fear holds me back from anything that could disconnect me from God. So we spent 17 chapters going the long road of Tanya, that's the name of this work, to understand how to create the love and fear needed to perfectly serve. And after 17 chapters, we said, wow, it's doable. But I don't know if it's doable for me. Ask Musia. Musia's there. All right. Taking a coffee break, just 1 second. Sorry, it was a bit of a crazy night, like many. So after 17 chapters, we said, wow, I now understand that I truly, in theory, could do it. I could learn, I could study, I could contemplate, I could meditate, I could create the love, I could create the fear, I could serve God perfectly, but I don't know if I could really do all that. That takes a lot of time. I don't know if I have it. That takes a lot of patience. I don't know if I have it. That takes a lot of mental concentration. I don't know if I have it. So in theory, it works, but I don't know if it's going to actually work for me. I need something easier. We're Americans. This was written in Russia 200 some years ago, but we're Americans. We definitely relate. I need it easier. So the alternative said, no problem. I got another road. We spent 17 chapters on the long road. From 18 to 25, we are going to create a short road. Why is it short? Because now you're not creating a love of God. You're uncovering the natural love every Jew has for God embedded in their soul. Every Jew naturally loves God. Every Jew naturally fears God. You're Jewish, you believe in God. You're Jewish, you love God. You're Jewish, you fear God. So all you need to do is uncover it. So we spent 2 chapters. I'm sorry for the background noise. We spent 2 chapters, 18 and 19, discussing this very intense, powerful love that's a gift that God embedded in my soul. And after those 2 chapters, we said, wow, this is really cool. I really have an enormously powerful repository of love and fear of God, but I have no clue how to access it. It's amazing. It's great. It's powerful. I've never felt it in my life. How do I feel it? And that's what we're discussing in chapter 20, 21, and 22. We just began 22 last week, so we're towards the end of this road that's taking 3 chapters. So in chapters 20, 21, and 22, what we said was, my goal is to figure out what do I need to do to uncover this treasure of love and fear of God. The Rebbe says to know that, you need to understand Achdus Hashem. You need to understand the unity of God. And as you understand more and more deeply, what does it mean that God is one? What does it mean all is God and there's nothing but God? What does it mean that creation in no way changed God? When you understand the unity of God, you will know how to naturally uncover the love and fear embedded in your soul. So that's what we've been discussing for 2+ chapters, the unity of God. In chapter 20, we said, all is God. There is nothing but God. And creation in no way changed God, as the verse says, I, God, did not change, because creation is so insignificant. It's just a bunch of words. God talks and there is. And what's words to me? Well, what's words to God? Creation's so insignificant, it didn't change him at all. In chapter 21, we delve more deeply. We didn't take away anything we said in chapter 20. It's all true. But more deeply, we understood it's not just that creation is so insignificant. It's that creation is him. It never left him. I'm saying, well, it's words. You speak words and they're gone. But God is as one with his speech after he says it, like we are with ours before we even think it. So his words didn't change him because they are him. And you aren't concealed from self, right? We spent a long time at the end of chapter 1 focusing on this concept. You can't hide yourself from yourself. So for everyone else, I could be a mystery, but I'm not a mystery to myself. I'm not hiding myself from myself. So if all of creation is God, creation doesn't conceal for God. It is him. So God and creation are one, really, from God's end without any barriers. From my end, from creation's end, I see barriers. And we said that's like the two-way mirror, like in some synagogues, that the women can see through it, but the men can't see back. So God can see through it, but we can't see the other direction. So we have an illusion of separation. We have an illusion of constriction. But the truth behind the glass is that we're as one with God as if we never even left his subconscious. That's how one we are. That's how close we are. And therefore, of course, our existence didn't change God. Our existence is God. And now we began chapter 22. And in chapter 22, we said everything we said in chapter 21 is true for creations of godliness. But chapter 22 gets a little deeper. It goes to God's ultimate point of constriction, creations of klipa. Klipa meaning a barrier to God, what we would call evil. The barrier to God, that's the klipa, that's the shell, that's the husk, that's not allowing the God energy to shine through. That God could take the only fabric of creation, which is self, and from self create anti-self. Wow, that's a big accomplishment. That God could take himself and make himself not aware that it's himself. That's what klipa is. That's the creation of what we would call evil. And to understand that dynamics of evil, the Rebbe says, let's analyze how the Torah terms it. And we're not here talking about this specific person or this specific forbidden item. We're talking about the powers, the energy of evil. And in the Torah, it's referred to as Elokim Acherim, which we would loosely translate as other gods. As the verse says, thou shalt not have other gods before me. Other gods, God's the only God. I know, we'll soon explain why we call them other gods when there's only one God. But last week, we decoded what does this term Elokim Acherim mean? And we said Elokim is Elokut, Elokah, godliness. Acherim, Acher, other, is etymologically like the word achor, backside. So Elokim Acherim, decoded, means a godliness coming from the backside, from the most external levels, from the most peripheral energies. That's the formation of klipa. That's the formation of what we call evil, the other side, where God so constricts itself that it takes the smallest amount, quantitatively, qualitatively, and absorption, the smallest amount of self goes into these forces. How do we know it's so small? Because the forces don't recognize it at all. That's what was created. A being that is completely out of touch with itself, completely out of touch with its source, completely out of touch that it is an existence of godly energy. Meaning, let me just compare this quickly. You have the creation of godliness, you have a creation of evil. They both are making mistakes. Because the truth is, everything is God, nothing is separated from God, nothing is outside of God's existence, and therefore nothing changed God. A creation of godliness understands God created it. A creation of evil, I'm using the term evil loosely, also understands God created it. A creation of godliness envisions itself currently as separate from God. A creation of evil also envisions itself currently as separate from God. So very similar. They both know that God created them. They both feel erroneously that they're separate from God. But now there's a very big difference. A creation of godliness knows it's God matter. It's just God matter that emerged from him and is now separate. That's the mistake. There's nothing separate. But the creation of evil doesn't view itself as God matter. It knows God created me, but it doesn't view itself currently as God matter. It views itself currently as something else, an independent existence, its own little God. Maybe God's a God with a capital G and I'm a God with a little g. Maybe I'm a little honcho and he's the head honcho. He created me, but now I'm an independent agent. That's the very significant difference between a creation of godliness and a creation of evil. They're both making mistakes, but the mistake of the creation of godliness is very subtle. That sense, that illusion, that mistake of separation. But that's the only mistake it's making. It knows created by God. It knows it's God matter. But the creation on the side of evil is making a much more serious mistake because it only thinks God created it. It doesn't recognize it is God matter. which is why it could operate in contradiction to God's will, seemingly. Okay, any questions on any of this? Can I explain why one more time? Can I explain why one more time? The difference between godliness and evil? Sure. Okay, the reason why we're discussing the difference between how godly matter views itself and klipa, which is the Kabbalistic term for what we will call loosely the forces of evil, views itself, is because that's in essence the difference between chapter 21 and chapter 22. Again, 20, 21, and 22 are explaining the concept that there's all God, there's nothing but God. The question on that concept is, we intuitively don't think that at all. What the Rebbe is saying is completely contra-instinctive. Everything inside of me and inside of every one of us, inside of everything on this planet feels I exist. And God says, not really. Because in chapter 21, we said the reason why you don't exist is because you don't exist outside of my existence. So since you don't exist outside of my existence, it's not a separate existence. It's just God's existence. So nothing changed. Originally, whatever originally was, there was, is, and will be only God. Currently, there was, is, and will be only God. Well, I see a lot of stuff. It's all God. But it's separate from him. Nothing separate from him. It looks separate from him. You're falling for the illusion. So in chapter 21, we're looking at this mistake or this illusion from the perspective of godliness. So a godly being, of course, knows it's created by God. Of course, knows it's only God matter. The only mistake that godly being is making is falling for the illusion of separation. Who created that illusion of separation? God. Why did he create that illusion of separation? Because otherwise we would cease to exist. So it was a necessary illusion. And we fall for it. That's necessary. That's what's supposed to be. And then we're supposed to do the work of unmasking the illusion, unmasking the facade, and saying, actually not. Actually, my existence is part of God's existence. Never left him, can't leave him, because nothing's outside of him. That's creations of godliness. Creations of evil, like creations of godliness, know God created them. Like creations of godliness, fell for the illusion and think they're separate. But the pivotal difference is creations of godliness know they're godly. They don't think they're anything else. It's like your breath. It's not cold, so you don't see anything. But if the air was cold and I was outside and I was breathing, you could see my breath. But it's still my breath. It's outside of me, but it's my breath. That's how godliness views itself. I'm God matter, outside of God, but I'm God matter. But creations of evil don't envision that their existence is God matter. They just know their creator is God. In other words, a godly being says, I am God matter. Mistake, I think I'm separate from him now, but all I am is God matter. Creations of evil say, God created me. Point, done, finished. God created me. I acknowledge God, he created me. But what am I? I'm a rock. I'm an angel. I'm a power. I'm whatever I am. You're God matter. Are you kidding? I'm not God matter. I'm a rock. I'm not God matter. I'm an angel. I'm my own being, created by God. Like if I would think, if someone goes into a kitchen and makes brownies, you took a bunch of ingredients and you made the brownies. Are the brownies you because you made them? Am I God because God made me? God made me, and now I'm me. As versus the creation of godliness that says, I'm God matter. All I am is God matter. All there is God matter. But I'm God matter currently separate. That's a mistake. There's no separation. You fell for the illusion. Now uncover the illusion. So that's the difference between the perspective of chapter 21, the perspective of chapter 22, the perspective of creations of godliness, the perspective of creations of the other side, the forces of concealment of God's will. Any other questions on any of this? Okay, so we are going to now continue in chapter 22. So we said the first explanation of the term which in the Torah in Hebrew is Elokim Acherim, which we translate to mean other gods. But here we're twisting the words, decoding the words to mean a godliness that is very minimalized. That's not a word. A godliness that's very minimized. That's a word. A very minimized godliness, so minimized that the recipient is unaware of it. That was the point. God made self so small that the recipient, this energy of evil, is clueless. He's aware of the outside peripheral godly energies, but inside of himself, I mean, he's an angel, he's a rock. No God here, because it's so covert, it's so minimized, we're not even aware of its existence. Okay, so continuing. I'm just trying to find exactly where I was. It's always a challenge. Okay. So we are, if you're looking on page 54, 2, 4, 6, 8 lines from the top. And what the Rebbe just said was the definition of Elokim Acherim, decoded. The first definition, a godliness that is so minimized. As we said, teensy tiny, just enough for existence in quantity, in quality, and in absorption. And that's how God creates all evil. Meaning, evil is a tool. Why does God, who's godly, create evil? So we can have a challenge. So we can find him. He hides, so we can find him. It's the ultimate game of hide and seek. He hides, and we got to find him. And we got to keep looking for him. And we got to know we're going to find him. And he hides behind these barriers, behind all the illusions of this world of separation, and behind all the illusionary powers of evil. That's how God set up the system. But God also set it up that we can tip it a bit, unfortunately. Because every time we transgress, every time a Jew transgresses, there's more power being fed to the other side. There's a lot of power being fed to the other side. And with all that power that's supposed to go to my soul, but is instead going to the force of evil because it got me to sin, so it lynched me, it hijacked, it kidnapped my powers, it suddenly has a lot more power. Again, it's still ultimately illusionary. It's still ultimately only there as a tool for my growth, a tool for me to overcome. I always think of the metaphor of the swimmer wearing the weights. Makes it much harder to swim. When you take off the weights, you fly over that water. So all of the powers that evil seemingly has is to force my muscles to grow. And then when the evil's gone, I just have these enormous muscles of belief in God, of love of God, of fear of God, of super rational commitment to God. But in the interim, if I fall, if I mess up, I'm feeding the evil a lot more power than it starts off with. But as it originally starts off, Elokim Acherim, Elokut, godliness, Acherim, Achor, backside, most minimal quantity, quality, and absorption, the smallest amount of energy possible, just enough to exist, to be the tool that's going to force me to work. So now the Rebbe is going to explain this more. Uperish Acharayim. When I'm saying the godliness comes from the backside, Elokim Acherim, if you can follow the Hebrew, the root word of Acherim is Acher, which means other. But if you put the vowels in a different way, if you vocalize it differently, it becomes the word Achor, same letters with different vowels. Achor meaning backside. meaning this minimal energy. So the Rebbe now explains, what do we mean by the backside? We took acher, we made it achar, we're saying that's backside, which means minimal. Let's explain this more. So the Rebbe says, this term acharayim, the backside, ka'adam hanoisei davar lison o, like if a person needs, I'm not going to use the term wants, needs to give something to his enemy, shelo bertzono. So he needs to do it, but he doesn't want to do it. Like God creating evil. Does God want the existence of evil? No way. But God created himself a need for evil. So he needs to give it, but he doesn't want to give it at all. So what does he do? He throws it over his shoulder. Here, take it. Why? Because he doesn't want to create eye contact. He turns his face from him, because he has hatred for him. We're assuming this is a good person and there's a legitimate reason for the hatred. So let me repeat the metaphor that the Alter Rebbe created. This is a metaphor that we're using here in Tanya. This metaphor is repeated in many, many other Hasidic works. If anyone here has studied Kuntres U'Ma'ayan from the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, this is the first, he repeats it throughout Kuntres U'Ma'ayan many, many, many times. So this is the metaphor. A person needs to give something to someone, but he doesn't want to give anything to him because he has a very bad feeling for him, but he has a need to give him something. So he says, I'm not going to look you in the eye and give it to you. I don't want such intimate connection. So what do? Turn my back to you. Here, take it, catch. You got it, good. I'm scared to look at him. I don't want to look at such evil. Which is, in a sense, God's relationship to evil. God created evil. God is vivifying evil. God could at any time, any moment, just choose to turn it off, not vivify it anymore, cease to exist. God doesn't have to destroy evil. God could just cease to vivify it. So why doesn't he? It's a great idea. Because God said it has a function. I don't like it, but I like its function. But I don't want too much connection. I don't want eye contact. I don't want a personal connection. I don't want an intimacy between me and this evil. So that was the metaphor. In the analogy here, Kach l'mayla, so too above, b'chinas panim, the term the face, like I don't want to make eye contact. I don't want to have face-to-face connection to you. The face, sorry, I just lost my place here. He pnimis haratzon ha'elyon, v'chefzo ha'amiti, is the inner will of God, is his true desire. So we're now doing another Hebrew wordplay. Biblically, the term Elokim acherim, God's acherim, we said acher, other, is etymologically achar, backside. Throwing it over my shoulder. You're only seeing my backside. You get the most minimal part of me, right? I'm scared to have any real connection to you because there's so much evil there. Now the Rebbe is saying the other end is the face. In Hebrew, the word for face is panim. A kamatz under the pay. Panim. That also has an etymological connection to the word pinim. Now, instead of the kamatz, I put a shva. Pinim, inner, like pinimi, an inner person. So the Rebbe is saying the backside is external. The face, the panim, is the pinimi, the pinimiyut, the inner dimension. And that's why I'm protecting it and guarding it and don't want to connect to that force over there with it. So the God's going to give that force his backside, his most external dimension, because God doesn't want to violate himself by exposing anything more intimate. But unfortunately, when we sin, we give that force a lot more intimate power on God. So the Rebbe says, the face, when I'm talking about God's face, eye-to-eye contact, the face. This is the inner dimension of God's will and his true desire. Now, what does the Rebbe mean by those terms? What the Rebbe means is we have many levels of will. We have many levels of what we want. And they could all be true, but some are more intimate, more personal, and some are more external. Like just a simple analogy, I have a will to get up in the morning on time, early. Why do I want that? I went to bed so late. Because I got to make it to work on time. Why do I want that? Because I got to keep my job. Why do I want that? Because I need a paycheck. Why do I want that? Because I need a home. I need a roof over my head. For that, I need money. I need food in my cabinets. For that, I need money. Oh, so really you want a house and food? Yeah. But for the house and food, I create the external desire for money, for which I create even more external desire for a job, for which I create even more external desire to come to work on time, for which I create even more external desire to get up early in the morning even though I'm exhausted. All of those are things I do desire. I desire all of them. But they're not all considered my inner desire. They're not my core desire. But from the core desire, there are layers and layers and layers of other desires that will ultimately feed into the core. Right? So that was a very simple example. That's our life. We understand that. So it's also true with God. God has an inner desire. His inner desire is for Mashiach. His inner desire is to have a home in this world. What does a home mean? Revelation of self, permanent revelation of his essence and being. That this physical world can absorb it and can survive and can reflect its own godly nature and be absolutely one with him. He's at home. That's what he wants. That's why we all have a very deep desire for a home, because God has a very deep desire for a home. To get his desire fulfilled, God did many crazy things. God constricted itself. God created evil. God vivifies evil. All of this crazy stuff is to feed into that core desire to have his home on this world, to have a complete, permanent exposure of his very essence and being. So when I'm looking at all those other layers of will, they're all his will, but they're not his true will. They're not his inner will. Those are outer wills he created to ultimately allow his true will to happen. So because he wants this world to be his home, he needs evil. He needs evil to challenge us. He needs us to overcome it and not succumb to it. He needs us to recognize him despite the illusions. He needs us to trust him. He needs us not to be scared. He needs us to do a lot of things. Well, to do those things, we need the evil as the prop to allow those other things to happen. So does he want this prop? It's ugly. It's disgusting. It repulses him. But he needs it as a prop for all these other things. And all of it ultimately feeds in to his essence desire of a home on planet Earth. So he wants it, but in a very external way. He wants it as a means to get what he really wants. Just as a person who's exhausted wants to get up early in the morning as a means to have the food and the home. So he wants evil as a means to ultimately remove all evil and has his home, his complete permanent revelation of self on this world. So therefore, the Rebbe says, God has an inner desire. His face, his panim, is reflecting his pnim, reflecting his inner essence, reflecting what he really wants. But he's not showing that face to the forces of evil. He doesn't want them to feed off his face. He only wants to give them the little as possible for existence. And that's why we said, Acher, other gods, Achar, the ones that get to see God's backside, because that's all he's going to show them. He doesn't want them to feed off anything else. What God really wants is to extend himself, vivify, be connected to all forces of godliness, all forces that are connecting to him. of forces that are one with him, that are serving him, that are in connoissance with his will. But the other side, the forces of impurity, it's an abomination to God. He hates it. He's vivifying it. He hates it. The two are not mutually incompatible. He absolutely hates it, and he's absolutely vivifying it. It's an ugly tool I need. If you would imagine someone needed these horrific, fierce German shepherds to guard something, doesn't mean they like them. It just means they need it. So God needs these tools of evil to get what he really wants, a home in this world, Mashiach. And therefore, God forbid, God is not giving these forces of evil anything from his intimate inner dimension, from his face, panim, pnin, face, inner aspect. He's not showing his face to them at all. He doesn't want them to feed off the face. You're connecting on the level of the face. You're getting me on the inside. I don't want you to get me on the inside. There was a Tana. I don't remember if it was Reb Meir or he was watching Reb Meir. I'm bad with names. But there was some Torah scholar, might have been Reb Meir, but it might not have been, who was far superior to all of his contemporaries. And they said, how come you're so much smarter than us? How come how you come to know so much more? He said, because when I was a child, the teacher of Torah at that time, I got to peek in. I was too young to attend the study hall, but I got to peek in to the study hall and I would watch his back. I'm like from behind, from seeing his back. And from just seeing his back, I gained so much. That's how I'm so much beyond. He says, could you imagine if I had seen his face? When you're in a class, watch the teacher. Then you're making that inner eye-to-eye, face-to-face, inner-to-inner connection, and then you so much more absorb the teachings. But Meir could have been the one that said it, or it could have been the teacher. I don't remember which one. If someone does remember, please post it up for the rest of us to know. But the point of the story is clear. When you see the face, you're gaining the inside of this person, the inner highest, the inner vitality, the inner dimension of his teachings. And therefore it affects you in your insight as well. And that's why God says, those forces, only the back. I don't want to let them feed off the face at all. It's only like he's throwing it over his shoulder to his enemy. He doesn't want them, but he needs their existence as a tool for something else. To punish the evil, to reward the righteous who crush these forces of evil because they reject them. Because they look at all the enticements and they say, God, I'm choosing you. This all looks fun. I'm choosing you. That's the reason for all of those other stuff. And this is what we call the backside of God's will. That minimal expression of self, just enough for the existence of the evil to be a little tool. But then again, when we sin, we make it a very big, powerful, overpowering force that we could still overcome. But of course, it's much more difficult because we gave it a lot of power. The more we believe in evil, the more we empower it. The more we're scared of evil, the more we empower it. The more we listen to evil, the more we empower it. And then we have to struggle and deal with it. Any questions on any of this?
Can evil change itself over into good?
No, not at all. The only one that can change evil is the Jew. Perhaps the non-Jew in their laws, it's not so clear. So I'm putting a question mark by the non-Jew, but the Jew definitively can. And besides the Jew and maybe the non-Jew in their commandments, nothing else can. The force itself can't, but the Jew can. Within evil is the broad term for anything that we call the other side. I said I'm using the word evil loosely because it's a convenient word. It's not really the Kabbalistic or Hasidic label for it. The term is the other side. And everything on the other side is vivified through the klipa. A klipa means a shell, a husk, a barrier, because that's literally what's happening. Everything is godliness. The only building block is godliness, but it's godliness encased in a barrier that it becomes non-accessible. So as we mentioned last week, there are two types of these shells, impermeable and permeable. The impermeable ones are called Kabbalistically klipa tme'a, complete impure shell, husk, cannot get past it. The permeable ones are called klipat noga, which means noga is the shine. There's a shine of God's energy that pierces through the shell. So anything that receives its vitality from that fourth level, which is permeable, we, the Jew, can directly shift to godliness. The item, the energy can never move itself. We can shift it by our actions. Anything that's from the other three levels of complete, impure, impermeable, impervious to us energy, basically we have two ways we can help the situation. One way is by rejection, meaning if there's a force that's coming to tempt me and I don't give into it, I lessen the power that force has. So I'm shrinking the evil by my rejection of it. If there's a fear that I don't give into, if there's a power that I'm not going to believe in, I'm shrinking the evil by my rejection of it. That's the traditional way I can affect those evils. The other way, which is sort of the, if you're stuck in the situation, approach is if one succumbed to evil, sinned with it, and therefore now has a very intimate relationship with it, and then did an absolutely intense returning to God from love, all of the evil that created his descent and therefore inspired his return, all of that evil ascends. It's all freed. All the husks are gone. All of that energy is now lifted up to godliness. So those are the two roads how a Jew could affect absolute evil. But the middle ground is very easy for us to elevate, and we do so all the time. And last week, I think I spent the whole time talking about my pen. That's an example of that intermediate ground. It's still on the other side. There's still a shell around it, but very easy for me to lift it up and make it godly energy.
So what you're saying, yeah. So what you're saying, that's actually, this is the responsibility of us, the Jewish people around the world, to
eradicate evil. It's our responsibility to eradicate evil. Yes.
Only we can do that, you're saying.
Well, I'm saying based on the teachings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, there is some room to say a non-Jew can perhaps slightly, but it's not very clear. So probably in big strokes, it's only the Jewish people. And the Alter Rebbe has a whole plan for bringing Mashiach, like he explains in Tanya. And his basic vision is take everything like my pen, everything that's on the other side, but in the most minor way, klipa noga, and move it to God's side. If you do that, all of evil will cease to exist because it will have nothing to feed off of, because all of these lower energies are really using this intermediate level to siphon the food into, to energize themselves from. Once that middle level became godly, there's nothing left. It's godliness and evil. Evil is just going to cease to exist. There will be absolutely nothing feeding it. So yes, that is a very strong example of how we truly impact the world. And truly, we destroy evil by our own virtue. We don't need guns. We don't need arrows. We don't need to go on any witch hunts. The more we increase in godliness and therefore reject the evil, we shrink it, we shrink it, we shrink it. That's how we fight evil, by adding light.
Wow. Thanks.
Any other questions? Anyone else have a question?
Cyril, Is that why Jews are held to a higher standard? You know, everyone could do terrible things, but the
Probably.
Jews.
That's so true, Dottie. Probably. It's a very intuitive response that the world sort of knows but can't articulate, but ends up, yes, you're not supposed to behave that way. You're a Jew. Yes,
Yeah.
I think you're
Yeah.
very right. I think that's very true. Anyone
Thanks.
else? Any other questions? Okay, so let's continue with this concept. So we said that we discussed the backside. God says, no intimate connection here. I hate evil. That's why the tzaddik hates evil. The absolutely righteous person hates evil because he mirrors God, and God hates evil. Well, God caused evil to exist. True, but what does that have to do with anything? He still hates it. And since he hates it and caused it to exist, that's why he's only giving it the backside. I don't want to get too close here. So what are we talking about? What is God's will? God's will from the face. Remember, panim, pnim, pnimi, the face, the inner dimension. Hu makor hachayim hamachai es kol ha'olamos. That is the life that is vivifying all of creation. All of creation exists by virtue of the energy from the level of God that Kabbalistically we call Ratzon Ha'elyon, which would translate in English to mean the supernal will. In other words, everything exists because God wants it to. He wills and it is. So therefore, flowing through all the levels of creation, we're like the bottom of the batter, right? We're the bottom, we're the physical dimension. But there are myriads of spiritual realities. All of those spiritual realities exist because God has a will for them to exist. I'm going to tell you something here that the Rebbe says later is a very powerful thought. They all exist by virtue of God's will. But God gave the Jew something more than all of the spiritual worlds have. And that's a mitzvah, a commandment. What's the difference between a commandment and the will of God? The will of God is what vivifies all. But a commandment is the inner dimension of that will. So when a Jew chooses to serve God, like we are currently doing a commandment, we're studying his Torah. That's a commandment. So all of us are accessing the inner dimension of God's will, the face of the face. And you know where that's flowing? Through all of the worlds down to me. So right now, every spiritual reality, all of the myriads of spiritual worlds, they're getting the good stuff. Why are they getting the good stuff? Because a Jew on planet Earth is learning God's Torah. A Jew on planet Earth is giving charity. A Jew on planet Earth is lighting the candles for the Shabbos. Every time we do a mitzvah, it's not only helping us, it's only opening up the channels of blessings for us. It's opening up the channel that flows through all the spiritual worlds. So just as Rachel pointed out, actually it was Esther's question, but the force of evil can't change themselves. They need a Jew to do it. So all the spiritual worlds can't help themselves. They have no ability to access the real stuff, the deepest, richest core of God's will, except when a Jew does a mitzvah. And then they get to benefit as well. Sort of like ultimately, of course, with Mashiach is taking place here. Mashiach is not taking place up there. It's not, well, Mashiach will be all over. Like we're very democratic, right? Very liberal. Mashiach will be here. Mashiach will be on planet Atzilos. No, not at all. Mashiach is here. But since Mashiach is here, all the upper worlds will get the basking in the glow of what's happening down here. But now what we're saying is just to understand this idea of God's will, that all of the upper worlds all of creation exists because God wants it to, because God wills it to. And therefore, all of creation, which are all godly entities, are subsiding on God's will, which gets even stronger when we do a mitzvah. So the supernal will, God's will, from the aspect of the face, the inner dimension, is a source of life that vivifies all the spiritual worlds. And that will is never going to rest on the other side. That will does not want to have any direct contact with the other side. Not only is God's inner will never going to be willing to rest on the other side, even God's external will, that's vivifying the other side, is not going to rest on them. Resting means be revealed. The term in Hebrew, it's in Kabbalah, it's in the Gemara, and the Talmud, is called Hashra'as Hashchina, which we would translate as the resting of the divine presence. But what that term means, the resting, what does it mean God is resting? It means the revelation. So that revelation of God's will is never going to be on the other side. Even the external level of God's will that vivifies the other side is never going to rest on it, which means never going to be revealed on it, because that's like way too close. It's just going to do this like encompassing job, peripheral job, not getting too close, just like making sure it has enough to exist. That's all it's supposed to have, except for when we mess up, and then it gets a lot more. And also the backside of God's will, which is vivifying the other side, it's not going to rest on it. It's not going to be revealed on it literally. No, it's going to be hovering over it. It's going to be external, encompassing it. That's as close as it wants to get. And that's why evil is associated with death and with impurity, because God is life. So evil is death. God is purity. So evil is impurity. The whole concept, of course, as I'm sure we all have heard, of how death came into the world was through the primordial sin, through the original sin. Before that, we couldn't have the concept of death, because death would mean like a space where we don't perceive God. But when there was sin, now evil has enough power to be expressed in the world. That's called death. And that's why God says in terms of Mashiach, I'm going to remove impurity from the world, and therefore there won't be death, because there won't be the evil that creates death. But again, the Rebbe is saying, do we know why evil is death? Because God is life. There's a verse, we probably all know it from synagogue, which says, and you that cling to your God, you're living today. What does that verse mean? It means when you cling to God, you have life. And when you separate from God, you have death. When you cling to God, you have holiness. When you separate from God, there's the absence. When you cling to God, you have purity. When you separate from God, you have impurity. So now we understand why evil is death. Because God's not going to get too close. He's vivifying it from as much of a distance as he can have and giving it as little as he can give it for it to just exist. So there's so little God energy in it. That's why it's called death. There's so little God in it. That's why it's called impurity. Because where God is found is life. Where God is found is purity. And I guess we should stop at this point. Any questions on any of this?
What if you're saying like we have this power of a mitzvah, which is really like, wow, powerful connection, and the forces of evil are really there to obscure godliness and to be more of a test to us. So what happens when a person actually overcomes that test? Like, it must be more powerful than just the mitzvah itself if there's no temptation. But
So what happens? There's so many things that happen. So what happens in which dimension, in which realm?
I don't know. I just want to know
When a
Yeah.
person is tempted and overcomes attempted to do the wrong thing and overcomes it, the point I was developing today is that shrinks that power that was trying to tempt him. Meaning every time we do the wrong thing, as I mentioned many times today, we feed evil. Every time we overcome it, we shrink it. So that's one thing that happens when you overcome the test. There's many other things that happen also. It depends on what the test is and for what reason. Like very
does
often,
it benefit others, not just the person themselves? Is there like a ramification, like where it's as a ripple effect, that evil is
so
the power?
on many levels. That's what I said. There's so many things that happen when you do a mitzvah. Like you could talk about it on so many different dimensions. So first of all, does it benefit other people when I do a mitzvah? So there's two levels of how it benefits other people. One is what Firma said, the ripple effect. And then there's something else as well. The ripple effect means that the more goodness and godliness is in the world, it literally like filters into the energy of the world. And as it filters in, it intensifies the good and minimizes the bad. That's a ripple effect. So there's some Jew in Indonesia that's right now contemplating yes or no in a very serious issue. My good deed just sends more and more godly energy that's going to empower him, this person I don't know and doesn't know me, to make the right decision. That's a ripple effect. There's also something else you can do with mitzvahs. And that's that you can literally gift the mitzvah to the Jewish people. And you can say to Hashem, you can say to God, this commandment that I'm doing, I'm not doing for myself personally. I'm doing for the Jewish people, which means I'm saying that I want all of the benefits, all of the God energy that comes down. Because normally when you do a mitzvah, when you do a commandment, the primary God energy comes down to you. I don't want any personal extra benefits. I want the entire world Jewry to equally share the gift that this commandment is creating. And that's possible. There's also something you can do on a more individual level, which is you could say, God, I'm doing this thing for you and don't put it in my bank account. I'm doing it to help so-and-so. So all the benefits, all the blessings, all the God energy that this commandment is going to produce, I want it to go there. And you can do that as well. So you help everyone by the ripple effect. You can choose to help everyone by consciously gifting your mitzvah to world Jewry. Or you could choose to help a specific person or family or whoever by saying, God, this mitzvah is as if they did it. I'm doing it not for me, not for my credit. I'm doing it for them. I want them to benefit from it. And all three of those options are possible. Any other questions?
But you're still getting credit because you gave it over.
But you're not getting the benefit. Meaning, if you have an obligation to light Shabbos candles, you did light the Shabbos candles. But the blessings and the energy that's supposed to come down to you for those Shabbos candles, you're sending to someone else.
Right.
So
I'm thinking more.
You did your mitzvah, but what the mitzvah is supposed to do for me, I'm voluntarily gifting to someone else.
So like when you say people's names when you put money in the pushka for them. So but I'm putting the money in the pushka, but I want certain things for, different people or the family or whatever it is. So
Very good example. I'm putting the money in, so stucca charity is being done. But the benefit of this coin, the power of this coin's energy, I want to go to help so-and-so. That's
That's
exactly what's
fine.
happening.
I mean,
That's why
Hashem
I'm doing it.
knows what you're doing anyway all the time, so.
Exactly. Exactly. We were very powerful people. We're very powerful. And that's something we really have to always remember. We have enormous power. We should never shortchange how much power we have. It's unbelievable how much power we have. We really, really, really do. Somebody was telling me yesterday this story. I don't remember the details, but story leads to story leads to story. They were all basically the same point of, like, let's say a situation where one person is praying that the other person get married, and that person is praying that this person have a child. And, like, it happened the same night. Or things along those lines. Like, it's just unbelievable. Like, how did just regular, simple people do that? Because we're Jews. We're very, very, very powerful people. Any other questions? Okay, so what we'd like to do at this point is share miracles, share the good stuff, share kindnesses, share good things we experienced over this week that we'd like to thank God for. And then what I wanted to, because I felt it was a difficult week, was also for people to have an opportunity to talk about it and share their reflections on it. But let's first start. If someone has something they would like to share, something positive that happened that they'd like to thank God for.
Okay, I'm going to start.
Thank you,
I
Grandma.
I want to thank God for Bracha Turin. I got to say thank you to Bracha Turin, who said that she's going to go get Hinder for me from camp. So I just have to say it was a miracle that she's going to do that, and I'm very grateful to her. So I just want to say that. And thank you to her mommy for raising her.
I don't take that much credit, but I'll take the thanks. We don't take the blame for our kids. We're going to take the credit for our kids. We do our part, and then whatever happens is way beyond us. But thank you for that. Anyone else? Anyone else has something that happened to them good this week that they'd like to thank God for?
Well, yes. So during the 3 weeks, of course, I knew we were not supposed to do any work, that we're remodeling our apartment. And so we were not sure if the first 2 weeks you're supposed to not do anything. I just didn't feel good about it. I went ahead and I hired somebody. It was a disaster. So then, we spoke about it and we decided, I just knew that as soon as Tisha B'Av is over, everything is going to fall into place. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, during the 3 weeks, my husband also fell in that, from some things that were on the floor in that condo that we were working on, cracked his head, bled, and it was a very scary moment. But anyway, so Baruch Hashem, everything went well. And then Monday, the guy just called us and said, I'm ready to work. And things are just going so well, bli ayin hara. So I'm very, very thankful to God that he just said, you're not going to do anything when you're not going to build, when you cannot build. We need to build Bet HaMikdash by shiurim and everything and you're just not going to do it. And he wouldn't allow. And then
it's nice that it's working out so well now. You see, when it's the right time, it goes. When it's supposed to go, it goes.
Baruch Hashem. Another one little thing, well, it's a big thing. I've been waiting for a school in New Jersey to let me know when they're going to have the orientation dinner for students and parents, because I place the students, so I have to be there. So I told him not Shabbos and not Friday because I'm Jewish. He happened to be Jewish also. And so then I get, yesterday morning, I get an email and he gives me September 9th. I said, oh my gosh, I forgot to tell him it's a high holiday. Well, he knew it was high holidays. He did it one day after Rosh Hashanah, but it fell on Tzom Gedalia. So I told my husband, you know what? The Rebbe is saying, come on over for Rosh Hashanah, for. So we made reservation. It was amazing. We found a room at Eshel. At least Rosh Hashanah will be by the Rebbe. So
Very nice.
yeah, Baruch Hashem.
The lemons became lemonade. Very nice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very nice. Anyone else? Anyone else have something they want to share positive that happened that they'd like to thank God for?
You should know that people can't find workers today. So you're really having a miracle.
And they can't find construction
Yes.
supplies when they can find workers.
It is very impossible. I went through so many. I lost so much money, and Baruch Hashem, Hashem is great. I'm very, very thankful. You're very right.
I actually need some help here, you know, with doing some stuff. I'll have to contact you and find out.
Yeah, please contact me and let me know. I'm really good in construction. I've been doing it for a while, so I'll be more than happy.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you give me your phone number?
Yeah,
Oh, why don't
908.
you? Okay, all right.
Okay, 928. Sorry for
No.
doing this in
No
class.
problem. Business. I was gonna say put it in the chat. Just say it to you. It's fine. You'll write it down.
Okay,
Not really.
928.
No, it's better that you give it to her because it's not, yeah, Rebbetzin will give it to you.
I'll give it to you. Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
no problem. It's recorded. It's whatever. I'll give it to you. So
Oh, okay, yeah, I forgot about that.
no
Right.
problem. No problem. But you'll get it. I'll give it to you. It's Hashem. All right. Anyone else have something they'd like to thank God for?
Well, I felt terrible.
She asked me, when's your ETA back? Just because I need the car to take Mishka Benjamin at 10:15.
Sarah, keep
Hello?
going. Yeah, keep going.
Oh, so I was nervous about the tummus and everything, and I got this recipe for like a healthy Powerade drink with fresh orange juice, fresh lemon, a little bit of raw honey, and some Himalayan salt. So I was drinking that from Friday and stuff, and then I take this stuff called Kalitzo from Israel, and I fasted better than I fasted in a long, long time. And I was just very sad and stressed from the whole mice and everything, and you know. And then when you can't do your stuff in the afternoon, and I was like, you know, caged. It was hard to, you know, but it worked out. The tummus turned out better than I thought it would.
And it's Baruch Hashem over.
Yes, Baruch Hashem. Yeah, now really.
We are last Tisha B'Av and Golos.
Yeah, you know, I took the kinas and the echa, and I never do this, but I tossed it to another place on the table. And Rabbi Weinreb did mention, he mentioned Reb Shmuel, you know, the Rebbe Marash about the Hayanyan. Wait, what? No, I'm losing it. I can't. Okay,
It'll come to you.
about a krechts, about giving a krechts. So he never lets me down.
Good. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. So does anyone have, I just wanted, I mean, it seems so crazy because I remember last Tuesday, we took the time after the class to share our thoughts and our memories in terms of Fagi and our feelings, our thoughts, our reflections. And now it's a week later and it's a lot. It's been a very, very difficult week for those of us in Chicago. Very hard week, a lot of pain. So I just wanted to use this forum if anyone had anything they wanted to share, any reflections they had, any things that they took comfort in, or anything they were thinking about that they'd like to share with us.
Well, you know, going on Shabbos to shul, uh, gosh, he used to come in with this cute smile, going fast, you know, like he wasn't running, but he was just going fast, like he's very important. He's going to do something really important, going into the men's and then coming and giving this big smile. And, you know, this past Shabbos was very difficult. It was very difficult to be in shul. We're just on our way right now to go be Menachem them, but then his brother was there, and to see that face that's so similar and running in and out and smiling was just such a nechama, you know. It's like, I know it's not going to be easy for him because that's how people are going to be looking at him maybe, but it was nice to see him come to shul. I didn't expect him to, but he did. So that's all I want to say.
Anyone else had anything they were thinking about? They wanted to add?
That Mashiach is really an emergency. Mashiach is just an emergency.
I agree 100%. We need the Rebbe to be מתגלה very very מהר, תכף ומייד ממש.
But I mean, I don't think anyone will have an answer, but Chicago had 3 big things in a very little amount of time within like our community, with Leah Fool's parents in Surfside, and then Faggy and now Herschel. What do we have to do to ramp it up? And is there something like glaring that we're doing so wrong? I don't know what to think, and like how to put it into good action.
Yeah, I was thinking that also. 3 in a row, boom, boom, boom. Very hard. Very hard, very traumatizing. Very, very, I got very jumpy lately. I try not to be, but it's just, yeah. I don't know, anyone have any thoughts on that? I mean, I'm sure we all realize it. Anyone have any thoughts on that idea of like, what do we need to do as a community to change the energy, either to rectify the wrong or just to make sure there's a lot of protection, a lot of good coming in?
Well, I think if each one of us, like your son, sent a post on Facebook to take on yourself a mitzvah, something that's really difficult to do. So I've been thinking about it, but I haven't come up with mine yet. So, but I think that would help.
Sure. Anyone else? Anyone else have any other thoughts about what Sarah's saying or anything else in this connection? Well, I know what Sarah Leah was talking about a lot is the idea of aftos, is the idea of unity. I guess maybe, of course, especially in the 3 weeks, you think about that most naturally, you know, cause of the destruction of the temple, baseless hatred, the restoration of it, baseless love, and that idea of you know, that there really is a sort of lack of unity, which really needs to be rectified. And I guess each one of us on a personal level, of course, some things are communal and not entirely in our hands, but on a personal level, you know, increasing in baseless love, unity and love are different. I was thinking about this on Shabbos. You're talking about the destruction of the temple, and you have love and you have unity. So love means I have this warm, positive feeling for you. Unity means I can tolerate you. Like I could work together with you. I could sit at the same table with you. I could love you, but that doesn't require anything from my end. I'm just like a warm person, so I can send you my love. But unity means we're actually going to acknowledge each other and work with each other. We're actually going to be united in something. We're going to do it together. We're going to sit together. We're going to learn together, for brain together, work, acknowledge each other in a way that we're a unit. We're not separate, but loving entities. And so I was really thinking, I think there's a lot, maybe this is my perspective. I would think, well, I think there's a lot of love here. I don't feel a lack of love, but maybe there's a lack of unity, a lack of really just being able to be together, work together, function together, acknowledge all parts of the community as all equal players that we all are going to be one with. I don't know. That's what Charlotte was talking about that a lot. I don't know, people, obviously people come and go at Shiva, but I heard her saying that very strongly. And it was sort of echoed what I was thinking as well, that maybe we need to work on more unity. Anyone else had any other thoughts?
I think I want to say something about Herschel because you're honoring him. So I just want to say, because I taught him, he was my student, and I think I knew him on a certain level. And I just want to say that he was very, very, very creative, very bright. He could, in 1 minute, take something apart and put it back together, and it's just like, just had so much life and so much fun and so much highest to him. And he just wanted to learn. The more he can learn, the better. And when I went to daven near at the Levaya, and I felt his energy there, a happy, positive energy. And since I taught him, he got his first sitter from me. He had his sitter party with me. And I felt like in that happy energy mode, he was thanking me. And I was thanking him for what he taught me. And I just want to say it because I just wanted to say he's a very holy, high neshama, and what he's bringing is tremendous love and unity, and it's him. So that's all.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
I
I didn't
just-
feel that at all. I just felt enormous pain when I was there. I guess I was in a different wavelength. I was just overwhelmed.
Well, because I missed the funeral. I came
Right.
after when I could be just alone and daven near his cave.
Right.
That's why. So I felt his energy. I didn't feel everyone else's energy. I felt his neshama energy. That's why. Shlocha Pratzis.
It's very beautiful. Very
Yeah.
comforting.
I happened to see this letter, this famous letter of the Rebbe that he wrote to parents who had lost their child, and they couldn't get over it, and they went to the Rebbe and they said they just can't, like it's just too much. And the Rebbe told them that they must think of him as having gone somewhere very, very far, like away somewhere, and they send in him presents, like as if he's very far away in like a camp or somewhere, and they send in him presents, and every time they're doing good and mitzvahs and that, they send in him more and more presents, and to always. I remember that. So I happened to read that letter this week, and I can't remember all the details, but that's what it's.
Right. That's very powerful. The Rebbe speaks about, like, just imagine they're 1 floor up. You're doing your stuff. They're here. They're just 1 floor up. They're right. They see everything going on. They're 1 floor up. It's actually interesting. My husband told me yesterday that something that brought Sean my comfort. It's very interesting. Different people are comforted by different things, but sort of along lines of Lisa's saying, a little different. She said there's a neighbor he has who's not Lubavitch. The neighbor came over yesterday, and the neighbor said that when he was a child, his parents lost his sibling who was age 9, 10. I think it was 9. Just, I don't remember the details. Something happened and suddenly his brother passed away. I think there was some, no, I do remember. It was in 1962, he said the year, and there was some contagious disease going around in 1962. Maybe Dina can clue us in on what were the diseases in 1962 of children, but his brother caught it and his brother died from it. And he said his father was inconsolable. He was totally shattered. And somebody recommended that his father go to the Lubavitcher. His father was not Lubavitch. His father was very broken and he went. And he saw, he was a child himself, seeing his father being totally broken by his brother's death. And knowing his father went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he said, my father went in broken, my father came out healed. I saw him, he was like, okay, he was healed. And he said, my father would never tell me what the Rebbe told him. I don't know what the Rebbe told him, but I know whatever the Rebbe told him healed him. And for some reason that gave Shammai a lot of comfort. He said if it was a story and he know the story and he know what the Rebbe said, all right, that was for that, that was for that. But here it's his neighbor. And his neighbor knows he's Lubavitch. His neighbor's not Lubavitch. If you're not Lubavitch, you have a story, a Rebbe story, you share it with your Lubavitch neighbor. Never thought to tell him the story once. And then suddenly, like all the pieces put together, and he shared with him this very personal, very similar situation. It gave him a lot of comfort. Maybe the comfort is, whatever it is the Rebbe said, there is comfort out there. There is something that can give comfort. And that in itself is comforting. Someone in the community opened up to a very powerful letter on Friday. He said his Seder, what he does is he every day, I guess, reads or learns a certain letter. I don't know the details. Came very close to Shabbos. I wasn't really paying attention. I happened to be in a very emotional moment, so it was very good for me. And he saw the letter and he felt it was, communal significance. So he brought it over to my husband. He made a photocopy of it. And the Rebbe there was talking the letter to someone that had suffered a great loss. And the Rebbe gives comfort, the Rebbe gives blessings. And then the Rebbe said, this was like the punchline of the letter. The Rebbe says, I'm going to say it in my own words because it's a little hard to translate it word for word that makes sense. But the Rebbe says, like, sometimes things happen that our mind cannot wrap around. They just can't. But for a Jew, if you're in a space where your mind doesn't work, like, so to speak, or I didn't say exactly these words, I'm putting in my words, what difference does it make? A Jew's power of belief way overcompensates and overpowers the puniness of our mind. So ever small our mind is, and our mind cannot fathom this. The Rebbe said, you're a Jew. Your belief way overcompensates, is way more powerful. So where your mind doesn't make sense, your belief can handle it. And that gave me comfort. Because I was in a space where my mind definitely wasn't computing anything. But we're a Jew. We're Jews. And we keep going and we keep believing. And we're powerful people. We got a lot of belief in God. And that's way overwhelms anything the mind will or won't understand. Okay, anyone else?
Enough already. We've had enough already. And we were promised a long, long, long time ago.
Yeah. That's right. Enough pain. A lot of pain. I must say, a lot of pain. A lot of pain. God, we don't need to deserve it. You need to bring Mashiach now. Very true. All right. Well, God willing, next week, we're going to have amazing things to talk about. Probably the revelation and how we saw each other dancing on the streets of Jerusalem. So that's what we'll be really excited to say. We'll wait.
Amen.
Very, very,
Amen.
very happily. Very beautiful. I want to thank Froma who stopped by my house on Shabbos afternoon, close to the end of the day. And
Thank you.
she shared a beautiful thought that was so special. And then she, should I share your thought on truth? It was such a beautiful, beautiful thing.
You can share anything you want to share.
You want to share from her?
No, you could share it. You could share it.
From quoting someone else said that when God created the world, he was looking, what trait should he use to create the world? And he went through a bunch, and then he came to the trait of truth. And truth said, no, not me. The world can't exist if it has to hold up to the bar called truth. God said, no, we're creating the world with truth. But then God took this trait of truth and he shattered it. And he let all the pieces fall down into the world. And that was how he created the world, with shattered truth, which means that in everything in the world, there's a little bit of truth. And therefore, when you're looking at someone else, inside of them, there's a piece of truth. It might not be your piece of truth, because maybe you got a different piece. But when you're talking to someone else, respect them and look for their piece of truth. And hopefully they're going to look at you and find your piece of truth. And that's how they all come together again. All the scattered truths form one unit of God's truth.
Yeah.
And then after that, she had us do a circle, and we just like sort of held hands and envisioned the redemption. And it was a very, very, very powerful moment and a very beautiful way to go into the 9th of Av. So that's always a wonderful, wonderful thing to do, and a wonderful energy to be able to access. And we really can. It was very powerful. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining this week for this class, and next week in Jerusalem. Thank you so, so much.
Amen. Before.
Amen.
Yeah, it's
Amen.
been
Thank
before.
you.
We're just going to be here next week in Jerusalem.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.